Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Fellas, when you're not feeling well, like I have been this past week, there are typically some common sense rhythms, routines you go through to get back to peak performance, even better maybe than you were before you got sick. So in my case, it's a lot of rest, a lot of drinking fluids, taking of supplements, right? So that this next week, something I've been looking forward to for a long time, I go on vacation, I'm feeling healthy, rested, relaxed, etc., right? There's something going on in the world of college football that I think compares pretty beautifully to this. This is the SEC deciding on their conference schedule for the 2024 season. Texas, Oklahoma coming in. It's going to be one big happy family. And we wanted 9 conference games. And gentlemen, the SEC didn't take their medicine. They did not rest, hydrate, relax. We're back with 8 games in this conference schedule as we welcome you, the listener, into the 3 Tech Pod, college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. Fellas, I put the question to you, how do we feel about an 8-game conference schedule with 16 teams in the Southeastern Conference?
Not great. It doesn't inspire a lot of, fun outlooks for the 2024 season. I mean, it's still going to be college football. It's still going to be the SEC. They're still going to get the highest ratings because they have, by and large, the best teams from top to bottom. And, Texas and Oklahoma coming in is going to add a lot of eyeballs to that conference. But it just seems like a letdown, doesn't it? It seems like we were all, penciling in these dream schedules. There's schools like Texas A&M and Missouri have yet to get a home and home with all of the opposite division. It looks like we were finally going to rectify that after 10 years, and now it's gone, and just in a blink of a moment. And no one really saw it coming, it seemed like, until those SEC meetings this week.
Yeah, there were a lot of conversations leading up to this about what the schedule might look like. Was it going to be a 9? Were you going to have permanent rivals? Was it going to be a pod? Was it going to be any of that? And we thought there were going to be some kind of interesting solution to this, and instead we just get 8 games again and no real divisions and whatever. Right? That's kind of boring. My exact words. I tweeted this 9 minutes after the news broke. As a fan of an SEC school, this is super lame. And I would like to stand by that as the official statement. It's super lame. That's boring. I get that there's reasons, and we'll talk about all the reasons that they did this and why they thought this made sense. But as a fan and from a fan perspective, and I assume from a player perspective as well, this is super lame.
It is. It's for the fan experience, for the on-field experience, we certainly have a reason to be disappointed, and we're going to talk about all that. There's obviously another side, an ivory tower side, where the 8-game conference model makes a lot of sense, and we're going to break all of that down. We're not just talking SEC today, though. We're also talking about Colorado. Guys, it seems like they're on the doorstep of rejoining the Big 12, maybe a deal potentially in the works. What does that mean for Colorado? What does that mean for the Big 12? And then finally, the USS Klyavkov is taking on water. I mean, we're closing ballasts. We're chucking buckets full over the side. Like, the Pac-12 is in some serious jeopardy. We're going to talk about all of that. So I say all of that because if you're listening on the podcast, great. We're so happy to have you. I've actually noticed we've had a bunch of new subscribers here in the past few weeks as folks start to dip their toe back into the lukewarm waters of college football in the offseason. If you're on the video side, on the YouTube side, welcome. We're continuing to grow over there, youtube.com/3techpod. But you'll also see these put up in segments. Garrett does a great job of chopping the video up every week. If you're interested in Colorado, if you're interested in the Pac-12, wait till those video segments come out. You'll be able to see those in their entirety coming up very shortly. Also, fellas, of course, want to give a big shout out to our partners, the Transfer Portal CFB. We've got a magazine coming out here in a couple of weeks. by my count, we're like a month away from the release of what will be one of the best college football preview magazines out there. I've spent a lot of years writing, working in sports media. I've read the publications and I've seen the work that not only you guys are doing, some of the articles that I've written, but the team at the Transfer Portal CFB. I've got to shout out Dylan. He does an awesome job putting everything together, writing, editing. The vision that dude has is incredible. We're really excited about that, as well as our continued partnership with University Traditions. You guys are wearing some of the collections over there, some of the best hat wear in the game. They know that college fans want to rock their team's colors and locations, but also want to be able to wear it wherever they go, a family function, the golf course, etc. And University Traditions has come up with hats that just live at the intersection of kind of comfort and formal wear as well. You can use our code 3Tech15, 3Tech15 for 15% off your entire order over at University Traditions website. And they've got a bunch of deals running right now. So you can get some great looking hats for dirt cheap. I mean, you're kind of stealing right now. Garrett, you're wearing the College Station collection. Trey, you just got the Lexington collection. Looks great. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people wearing the Lexington collection right now as they scramble to and fro their dorm rooms, right?
Oh my goodness. If y'all haven't followed this, I'm surprised this Lexington connection was able to get out of town with all the traffic that's apparently happening there. But they're hosting an NCAA baseball regional for, I think, the first time ever, or the first time in a really long time. And the city planning committee did not take that into account, as they shouldn't. They don't need to plan their lives around possible college baseball regionals. But it's a big music festival in town in Lexington this weekend too. And so as a result, they were not able to book the blocks of hotel rooms needed for 4 college baseball teams to come in for a weekend. And they're all staying in the dorms on campus, including the host Kentucky, which I don't know if the NCAA made them do that or what happened there, but I thought that was a classy move by the host Wildcats as well. But man, guys, it just got me thinking, to tie this back into college football. Can you imagine in this new era where we're going to host the first round of playoff games on campus starting in 2024, what if there's like a Christmas market in, I don't know, in Salt Lake City, Utah, or Salt Lake City is kind of a big city, but I don't know, maybe Athens, Georgia just has this annual Christmas parade or something like that, or just one of these college towns that really doesn't have a lot of hotel room space. Can you imagine a visiting college football program, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, coming into a college town, and then Nick Saban is sleeping in one of those duplex dorms with 3 other coaches, and they're all sharing one bathroom and shower that hasn't been cleaned since 1972? Like, I am here for that. I hope we get that at some point.
There is no way that Miss Terry is going to let Nick Saban sleep on a Twin XL. There's no way that that's going to happen.
She's got to pack him the Tempur-Pedic topper.
Right,
That's right.
They'll have him up in some, big fancy tower in a luxury box somewhere, and the rest of his, little peons over here on the team, they can go figure out what to do. They're sleeping in dorms anyways. So,
hey,
but Nick Saban, there's no way he does that.
Give me the Last Chance U vibes, man. I mean, I've forgotten which season it is. I think it's the Independence, Kansas season where the offensive coordinator's like, yeah, man, I'm working for free. They're just paying for my dorm room. Like, I know it's small, but I don't really spend any time in here. Like, give me that vibe with Nick Saban, right? I mean, that's what he wants, right? Like, he wants parity.
Yeah, he wants everybody to be on equal playing ground and everybody to be,
He hadn't won a championship in a couple of years. That might make sense, but
that's right. Totally makes sense coming from the guy with all the resources and all the players and all the championships. Thanks, Nick. Hey, you know what? As we jump into the SEC and the 8-game schedule, I appreciate, I would like this on the record, I appreciate Nick Saban trying to fall on his sword, trying to say, you know what, guys, I'm going to do you a solid. I'm going to take the heat. I'm going to say something outlandish so that way we can sweep this 8-game conference schedule under the rug. It didn't work, but I think that's really big of Nick Saban trying to be the bigger person there.
Well, we can kind of set our watches by Nick Saban making some outlandish old man yells at cloud comment around this time of year, right? Like, what is it, 2 or 3 years in a row that we can just, late May, early June, it's about that time. Spring ball's over. It's a dead period for recruiting, so Nick Saban just has to say something that we all get to poke fun at a little bit.
That's right, exactly. So we tease this off the top, and it's big time news. So if you're a college football fan, you're aware of this. But what we really want to get into is why the SEC has chosen 8 games. What was the case for 9 games? Why did that make sense? But also, what is the SEC accomplishing by going to 8 games? So, kind of to set the stage, obviously, Texas and Oklahoma coming in 2024. This is the final year of the current arrangement before we expand the conference. And right now, the SEC plays an 8-game schedule. That is old news. That's what everyone chooses to pick on when Alabama or Georgia is running the gauntlet, and they have UMass come to town in November. They have Directional Tech come to town in November, and folks complain that it's a built-in bye week for these SEC teams. So, as fans of both a team in the Southeastern Conference and just as college football fans, I think we all would raise our hand and say, yeah, we would love to see the SEC go to 9 games, play that extra conference game, have that better product in the middle of November instead of playing an FCS school. The issue is that's the fan side. We're talking about the Southeastern Conference, who is in the middle of media rights, of trying to become, the Death Star, right, for college sports. And I'll turn it over to you guys. We were talking about this, in the prep leading up to it. Trey, the SEC by moving this chess piece is essentially upping the ante to ESPN, who they currently have their TV rights through, and saying, hey, if you want 9 games, you're going to have to pay for it.
Oh, absolutely. And if you've seen the defense coming out of, people other than, I'll talk about Peter Burns here in a second, why I think his tweet's a little out of pocket that he sent out this morning. But the real reason for this is the money. And it's been the off season of media rights deals. If you followed along on the show, we've talked about the Pac-12 ad nauseum. We've been talking about the ACC and the schools that are trying to get rid or get out of that agreement that has them locked in for until 2036. It's what dictates all of this. Every decision is being viewed through the lens of what makes the most financial sense for us as a conference. I think the SEC was touting the timeline was, if I'm remembering correctly, they announced the new media rights deal, and then Texas and Oklahoma are announced to the SEC, which, I think a lot of people were naively saying that, oh, that means ESPN's going to add to that media rights deal. I think if there's one misstep that the SEC had in all of this, it's that they didn't have their ducks in a row with Texas and Oklahoma before announcing that media rights deal, because ESPN isn't just going to back out of a contract that's now better for them because you added 2 teams. So in addition to that, this is the SEC saying, with deciding 8 games over 9 games, this is the SEC saying, hey, ESPN, if you want the extra premium inventory, if you want another game between Georgia and LSU, or South Carolina and Oklahoma, or, fill in the blank, Florida versus Texas, you're going to have to pay up for that. Until you re-up this deal and give us more money where we think we deserve with the extra conference inventory, enjoy your Georgia UMass, enjoy your Alabama A&M, enjoy your Texas A&M Prairie View. That's what you're going to get, because that's what you're paying us, and that's what we think that you are paying us for right now.
Yeah, well, and the SEC is obviously the premier conference, so they're going to get to pull top dollar. That's obviously true. Whoever was going to do this was going to get to do whatever they wanted to with the money and the rights and everything. They're going to get to pull whatever they wanted to from ESPN or CBS or whoever it was that they were negotiating for. My biggest issue here, I think, has to do with just in terms of exposure. Players that come to the SEC are what make the conference. They're not the best conference because they just have the best coaches or facilities. It's because the best players come to play in the South. Obviously, you're going to get teams like Ohio State that they're going to pull theirs because they're just national powers. But for the vast majority of the players, the best players are going to be in the South. That's why the competition is so good in the SEC. That's why people want to watch these games, is because, any given Saturday in the fall, you can have a Mississippi State upsetting Alabama. You could have, Georgia's on, upset watch against Missouri even last year. I just think that you have to look at this and say, some of these teams that we don't always think of as the powers, they can upset a team in the SEC, but that's why people want to watch. People want to watch for these games. And, for me, I'm looking at this and saying, it's kind of a double-sided coin. For one thing, obviously 9 games is going to cost a lot more, and you're going to want a lot more of that. But on the flip side, if you give them 9 games, that gives players more exposure because they want to go get drafted. They want to go find their way, into if they're a sort of a on the border between being drafted and not. More games, more chances for them on ESPN or ESPN2 with the scout maybe watching and the nation watching and a highlight reel and a Twitter clip. And all of a sudden you run a punt back and you're on somebody's radar, you could make a team. And, for these players being able to stay in conference and, continue the conference being as strong as it is, it's sort of a weird double-sided coin where, yeah, if you stay at 8 games, you're getting your fair market value. But I'm curious to see how that affects perception of the league and how that affects sort of the competition level around it. If they're saying, oh, well, the SEC is scared, these teams don't want to play, a full 9-game schedule. They just want to, go off and play their 8 games and they're scared and they're going to play Who Cares State, at the last of the season. I'm just curious how that goes. And obviously it wasn't all teams. I mean, 5 teams voted for Florida, Georgia, LSU, Missouri, Texas A&M, apparently. And this is, I guess, the rumored. We don't know if this is 100% yet, but
Right.
These teams are the ones who are said to have voted for 9 games.
Texas
so
and Oklahoma wanted it as well, but they didn't get to vote.
They didn't get the vote because they're not in yet. So
they were in the back of the
wait
room.
your turn. Wait your turn. Okay.
They were the proxy vote or the
right.
Puerto Rico in Congress.
Yeah, but see, I'm just curious how that affects the league. Is do those teams get a little bit more cred? I mean, obviously Georgia doesn't need it. LSU and A&M don't necessarily need it either in terms of recruiting. But does a team like Florida or Missouri, and they're saying, "Hey, we want to play 9 games," do they get a little bit more cred? Are there things that you can do to sort of tilt this in your favor? Versus, I mean, is this a way to say, "Hey, Bama's scared; they don't want to play 9 games"? Or there's these other teams in the SEC that are apparently scared. Tennessee doesn't want to play 9 games. Does that come back to hurt people long term? I don't know. I'm just kind of worried about what the perception of the league could look like going forward.
I don't think so. And sorry to cut you off, Mitch, but I don't think so. I think this is all going to get worked out within a couple of years. I think, 2024 is going to be an awkward hodgepodge and just a nightmare for the schedule makers.
Temporary solution.
It's going to be a temporary solution. This is going to get worked out monetarily. They will go to 9 conference games because, aside from the money thing, obviously that's what's driving all these decisions. From a fan base standpoint, it just is really disappointing to see it completely sold out for money. I get why they're doing it. And I think all those schools that voted against it, if the argument that they're scared comes up, I've already seen it on Twitter from the fan bases, right? There's such an easy cop-out argument that why would we give ESPN, this billion-dollar corporation, why would we give them an out? Why would we give Disney or whoever is getting these rights an out that we, why are we giving them free inventory, essentially? It's a really easy cop-out. So I don't know that the long-term concern is going to be there. But practically, I feel like the SEC is kind of holding the football right now, right? They're holding all the burden here because an 8-game conference schedule with 1 permanent opponent and 16 teams just makes absolutely no sense mathematically.
Yeah.
Like when you try to do the napkin math on that, you're going to have an odd man out. Like it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't add up. Like you have 7 conference games that you need to rotate through, and there are 14 other opponents. So you can rotate through it, but with all the permanent rivals, it just makes way more sense to do the other model where it's 3 permanent and 6 rotating. It just makes way more sense long term to do that.
Totally agree. And that's what Seth Emerson from The Athletic wrote about was, hey, the SEC has a perception problem right now. It's not that, for all the reasons that we've said, it's not that the SEC and their member schools are scared of going to a 9-game conference schedule. Although I don't think there's a single SEC team that minds playing directional tech in that November game, right?
The other side of it, from the money equation, these individual schools would be giving up a home game every other year. And that is quite literally millions of dollars that they don't have to share. And it's millions of dollars that gets, you talk about a college town like some of these schools that voted against it, like Starkville, Oxford, that's millions of dollars that are injected into that community every single year. And if you think the mayors and city councils aren't in the back ear of the athletic director saying, hey, you better vote against that because that means we're losing out on millions of dollars in revenue from people visiting, like you're just naive. That's just how this works. So it's a money standpoint coming into the conference and coming into these individual schools.
I think it was our colleague Dan Keegan from the Transfer Portal CFB who tweeted the GIF, the price of the brick going up, and that made me chuckle. And Dan had a thread about this, why this is just a financial positioning by the SEC towards the mouse and Disney, saying, hey, we'll go to 9 games. And Trey, like you said, like in 2025, it's almost guaranteed that this will be a 9-game conference schedule with 16 teams. Now, will they go back to divisions? I don't know. In 2024, they're playing an 8-game conference schedule, but without divisions. So
the tiebreaker scenarios are fantastic with that, by the way. I don't know if you guys have thought through that. The fact that we could have 3 or more undefeated teams and then only 2 of them get to play for the SEC championship, there will be riots in the streets if certain programs are left out.
It's an imperfect schedule for sure, but like we've said, I mean, this is all a stall tactic to get the lawyers and suits in the right room to renegotiate with Disney, because like you're right, the terms of the deal have changed, right? The status quo is no longer what it was when they signed that media rights deal. Now you've got 2 of the most valuable universities in their athletic departments in your conference. You're adding another game. There is so much revenue that's being left on the table by the SEC right now if they just capitulate and say, oh yeah, we'll do a 9-game conference schedule and ESPN gets to benefit from it.
I do want to say one thing that and I want to make sure people are keeping the same energy in terms of the conversation around all this. A lot of people have been talking about how, the last year or two, NIL is going to ruin college football, and, it's the transfer portal is going to ruin college football, and the 12-game playoff is going to ruin college football, and talking about what it's going to mean for on the field and how players react to stuff. This kind of thing, the jockeying for position, the only doing things to make sure that you can appease some kind of a network out there, and choosing your actual schedule. This is at least even or on par with that, if not maybe worse, in terms of affecting the on-field product and what we get to see as fans, and sort of the sportsmanship around the game. So if you're gonna bring that energy about NIL ruining the game and how players are going to get paid to go to different schools and keep the same energy with all these commissioners and all these presidents of universities only doing things on the competitive side for a money standpoint. Keep the same exact energy with all that stuff, because if you're going to blame players for that kind of thing, you got to go straight up to the top and blame them too. If you're going to make this about money, and if this is going to be one of the biggest drivers of cash in terms of sports, if football is going to do that, great. But again, if you're going to say that money in football is the problem and all that, then you keep it with this exact same thing too, right? Don't switch it up just because now it's about billions and the ESPN and CBS and everything else. Don't switch up now.
So if I could, I want to talk about Peter Burns' tweet, because I think this is the argument that you should not fall for if you're looking for who's the bad guy in this situation. And look, I don't want to pick on Peter too much. I actually really enjoy Peter Burns' commentary. He works for the SEC Network and he works for ESPN, so he's going to carry water for the SEC. He's going to toe the company line. But what he tweeted this morning on Saturday is, since the NCAA approved 12-game schedules in 2006, no team playing 9-game conference schedule has ever won a college football national championship. The Big Ten, Pac-12, and Big 12 haven't won a title since moving to 9 conference games. Meanwhile, the SEC has won 13 titles and the ACC has won 3, of course, all by 2 separate schools in the ACC's case with Clemson and Florida State. But that's just like a really lazy argument, isn't it? Like the fact that, Alabama and all these titles that they're winning, if they would have played Kentucky instead of instead of Southern Miss or Utah State or whoever they've played over the last few years, they're not going to win a title because they had to play Kentucky or Vanderbilt or Mizzou one more time instead of one of these just buy games from the G5 level. That's just a lazy argument, right? Am I missing anything here?
Yeah, I think he was being a little tongue-in-cheek there. I don't think it was entirely serious. Like, hey, look, guys, this is exactly why you don't do that. He did lead it off with fun fact and then put the more you know.
He did do the little.
But I don't think he was being entirely serious. But I mean, he is going to carry water. He does
He does
is a
like to
little
troll
bit of
other
the
conferences' fan bases too, and it's very
Yes, he
entertaining.
does.
right.
on
He
Twitter.
loves kind of defending the SEC and popping in probably where most media personalities shouldn't be, but that's kind of his Twitter persona. And for what it's worth, I love it. I absolutely love his Twitter persona and what he does. So it was kind of funny to me. I thought he was being a little tongue in cheek there and just kind of teasing some of the people doing this. It's not like there was no reason to stick with 8 games. We all disagree, I think, with the 8-game model right now, and we would all rather it be different, but it's not like there's no reason. I mean, hey, you want to win a championship, you got to stay at 8 games. So I think that was
Right.
kind of where he was going with it.
And on the flip side of that, if you think that there's going to be a Pac-12 team, or I mean, who knows if the Pac-12 is even going to be around in 2 years, but if let's just say
We'll get there.
Let's just say you're comparing in the 12-team playoff future, you're comparing a 10-2 Baylor and a 10-2 Auburn, okay, for one of the last at-large playoff spots. Is there anybody on God's green earth that thinks that the committee is going to look at that and say, "Oh, well, Baylor played that game against Iowa State at home, and Auburn that same week they were playing Southern Miss, so I guess we got to go to Baylor." Like, is there anybody on God's green earth that thinks that that's going to be used against the SEC? I don't think so.
Well, other than by the Big 12.
Yeah, they've been trying to do that for 10
representative.
years. And they also have a conference championship game that's a rematch, guaranteed every single year, and almost screwed them out of the playoff this year. So
One true champion, baby. Come on now.
except when they're winning.
I agree. I think on Peter's tweet, I do think it's a little bit of a joke. It's also just such a straw man argument to say, look, see, this works. You want to win a championship, you play 8 games. Like, there is no correlation.
It also helps to have the
it's
best
not
recruiting
absolutely
classes
causation.
of all time. It also
exactly
helps to have,
right. The best coaches and the best resources and the most money.
The little through line there is the embedded. Oh yeah, Nick Saban has been coaching in the SEC for the past 16 years.
Right. Yeah, I don't think anyone is cracking open the stat books and going, yeah, okay, 8 games. Oh, guys, check it out. Kirby Smart's at Georgia. I wondered where that guy went.
Well, and that also overlapped with like Urban Meyer at Florida and like all the success that LSU has had under different coaches. Yeah. So like, let's not pretend like this wasn't some really special football and some really special players along the way. I mean, we talk about Cam Newton at Auburn at the same time. So like, there are a lot of different things that happened and contributed to this very successful run of championships for the SEC.
Well, guys, let's go from football and cash to football and cash just further west. We're talking about the Colorado Buffaloes, who suddenly are poised to maybe return to the Big 12. I take you to athletic director Rick George's quote when he said, "We're members of the Pac-12. We're proud members of the Pac-12, and we've got to see where our media rights deal lands and where our conference goes," end quote. Later, he said, quote, "In a perfect world, we'd love to be in the Pac-12, but we also have to do what's right for Colorado at the end of the day. We'll evaluate things as we move forward." Guys, if I can summarize that, it's we love the Pac-12 and we're a part of the Pac-12 until we no longer love the Pac-12 or are a part of the Pac-12. A lot of words that were said and not a lot of meaning that came out of that, which is, this is talking season, right? Like, Rick George falls squarely in kind of fine form here for the beginning of June.
If I said that exact same thing to my wife, she would go ballistic. If I was like, look, I'm a part of this marriage and I love being a part of this marriage. And in an ideal world, I'm still a part of this marriage, but I just got to do what's best for me at the end of the day.
I got to see what paycheck you're going to bring home next week.
But if you don't land this media rights deal,
that's right.
You don't get that promotion.
Stay a part of this marriage. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous. We've talked about how, again, talking season, it just seems like a lot of the talk and a lot of the conversation coming out of the Pac-12 this year has been a little bit ridiculous. And obviously we've had some very successful Pac-12 videos on our YouTube channel. So it seems like people like to hear about this and talk about the drama. I think we're still waiting for what the Arizona guy said. Arizona said that the media deal was coming very soon. And I guess we're still waiting on that. That was a while ago. I'd have to go back and check, but we made that video a while back, before the draft.
It's coming, guys. Don't worry.
It's coming, guys, very soon. So I don't know, man. Maybe it's talking season. I'm also curious about this from a Colorado perspective. Like, I know they just hired Dion, and now they think that they're like champions of the world and like the new Alabama. But if we're being honest, they're still Colorado until they do something on the field, and they haven't proven anything. I guess you can kind of buy some Colorado futures right now, but there's not a whole lot that Colorado can sell from their actual success on the field the last several years. So I don't know why they're getting all high and mighty like they carry a massive brand with them. Yes, probably some teams would like to expand and take them away from their conference, but I don't really know why they think that they're in the position they are in.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Once USC and UCLA leave, they will have the most recent football national championship in that conference. Correct?
I believe that's
That might
true.
say more about the conference than Colorado.
Well, listen, yeah, no, not debating that, but that's where that kind of impetus is coming from. Guys, is this just going to
Right.
boil down to whether or not several members of the Colorado Board of Regents know what the CW is when all this is said and
It
done?
might.
Because if they get that contract, the CW, no, that doesn't.
What's
make,
the
what is
CW?
that? I don't have no idea what that is, and their kids can't explain it because no kids watch cable TV anymore. That's
Yeah.
going to cause them to go to the Big 12, maybe. I don't know, but I think it's a smart move for any of these schools that have an option to be
Sure.
looking around because, as we've been fond of saying, the ship is sinking. The SS Kleofkoff, as Mitch has loved to say.
Going down.
I think Stanford, Cal, Washington State, are they the fiddlers that are just going to play until it completely goes down?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
Well,
Yeah. They've got the
I mean-
cellos and the deck chairs.
yeah,
I was going to say, we can't seem to stay away from Pirates of the Caribbean references. So let's go ahead and throw another Jack Sparrow where, Kleofkoff has to be looking at the Big 12 right now and shouting, "Stop blowing holes in my ship."
It's a great point. So with that, right, Colorado, reportedly, according to the Athletic, number of other places, there is Big 12 buzz where Brett Yormark, the and I'm blanking on his name, not commissioner of the Big 12, thank you, has had an eye towards expansion, right? He wants to come in. He's shaken the tree for all that it's worth, and now he
and
wants
more
to
than just
maybe
football too. He's going after Gonzaga and basketball,
Right.
UConn possibly.
And if you read Brett's comments, he actually talks more about basketball than he does football
Which I
because
think
he
is
sees
really smart for the Big 12.
Yes, he sees that as a chance to make the Big 12 a perennial championship contender in more than just football, right? I mean, let's be honest. You're probably not competing for national championships on a very consistent basis once Texas and Oklahoma leave, right? Those are your two biggest guns. Now you've got other programs that are plucky. TCU obviously just played for a national championship. So you've got darts to throw at the board, but as far as blue chip programs who consistently will be ranked in the top 5, the top 10 of the FBI that are recruiting 5-star talent year in, year out, they're kind of losing that for football. Not the case for basketball, right? They kind of run the country right now, top to bottom in basketball. They've got a very strong baseball program as well. So I like the idea of more national expansion, thinking beyond just football, which is interesting when you think of Colorado, because by my count, Colorado would be a solely football-focused move, really just kind of ping-ponging off this hype from Dion and from what they've been able to do in the transfer portal. Am I right there?
Well, you also have to think about what's out there. Like, there's not a whole lot of teams looking to jump, at least from like big conferences, big name programs. It's not like the Big 12 can go right now and say, "Hey, Nebraska, Ohio State, anybody willing to jump ship, come join the Big 12?" It's not really going to happen there. So you do have to kind of look around and say what programs would be willing to make the jump up. To some degree, that's kind of what happened with this group that's coming in from the AAC with Cincy and all them. Like there's to some degree, it's just the fact that they wanted to jump to the Power 5 level. They realized their opportunity. And from a Big 12 perspective, maybe those teams aren't massive national brands, but they're competitive. They've been pretty solid. They have good fan bases. And so maybe you see some kind of future like, we'll drag you up with us. I'm curious from the Big 12's perspective, what you were just saying about losing those big powers there. I'm curious to see who comes out on top. Somebody has to fill the vacuum. It's not like they're all going to stay at this level. And I think to a certain degree, recruits and other players like that, they're going to notice that, hey, someone's going to rise to the top, and there's going to be a path to a playoff for me. And I was just talking about exposure. That's exposure right there. Go get on a playoff game. That's going to be exposure. 12 teams plus, the fact that you're not going to have these big brands like Texas and Oklahoma in your way. Does that open a door for TCU or Baylor or, Oklahoma State or, some of these other teams that could be looking? Texas Tech, we're all pretty high on with what Joey Mack's doing. There's a real chance for some of these teams to maybe say, I'll be the next team up. I'll kind of dominate the region in terms of recruiting and all that. And I don't think that that's Colorado, but I mean, heck, I mean, it could be. Deion could be, the next, walking on water savior of a college football program. So he could be that guy, and maybe a little bit of hype and some good players. You could be looking up in a couple of years, and Colorado's running that conference, making yearly playoff appearances.
Well, and we're less, like I said, we're less than 30 years away from, or I guess a little bit over 30 now, but less than 40 years removed from Colorado being a major national player on the whole scene. So we've seen it before. They have a massive, very passionate fan base that has not had a lot to get excited about. They're already less than 1 year into the Deion Sanders tenure. They are already extremely motivated and excited to, support the program in ways that they need to be relevant again. I think it's very mutually beneficial for both Colorado and the Pac-12. Colorado is a massive media market. You talk about the media markets that are realistic for the Big 12 to capture. Denver is, if not number one, it's in the top 3 probably in terms of realistic media markets. Colorado's a big state with a lot of television sets and eyeballs, streaming potential customers whenever we start to go down that road. And there's way more historic rivalries for Colorado in the Big 12 when you look at the old Big 8. Let's not forget, too, that Colorado kind of went at it alone in the Pac-12. They were originally supposed to be, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds of realignment history 101, but if you jump back to like 2010 era, Texas was trying to orchestrate 6 Big 12 schools, including Colorado, moving to the Pac-12, pretty much without telling any of the other schools that they're involved in this. So when that blew up, Colorado decides to go at it alone. It was a good decision for them at the time because the Big 12 was anything but stable in 2010 to 2012. So It was a great decision for Colorado. And now they find themselves right in the same decision. And I think that the history tells us that they probably will do what's in best interest for them. To me, that's going to the Big 12 as it stands right now.
Well, so if Colorado does make that move, and it sounds like, who knows what the timeline is, but there's certainly some smoke around this, and where there's smoke, there's fire. If Colorado does join, the Big 12 probably needs another school. So are we looking at another Pac-12 school? Are we looking at a school like Arizona, maybe Arizona State? Who else maybe comes with Colorado? And with that, we can kind of start that final segment here. Is this the death nail? Is Colorado going to be the death nail for the Pac-12? Because on the surface, it doesn't sound like that would be, right? Okay, if the Pac-12 is surviving USC and UCLA leaving, then why on earth would Colorado be the final nail in the coffin? To me, I see Colorado as step 1 of a 2-step exodus from the Pac-12. So now you've lost 4 teams. You've still got Oregon and Washington, who are not dumb. They've got to be on the phone, at least monitoring the situation, figuring out, okay, if the Pac-12 does go down, which you don't have a lot of confidence in the way that Kliavkov is running this. The media rights deal has been promised for months. It's still not here. Even if it does get here relatively soon, the options that we keep hearing thrown around are less than confidence boosting. So to me, Colorado may not be the haymaker that knocks the Pac-12 out, but it might be that 1,000th cut that kind of has slowly bled this, or, the 1,000th bullet hole, if you will, to stick with the SS Kliavkov, and just finally okay, we can't take on any more water. This ship is going down.
I don't think Colorado is that team, but I do think Arizona would be, right? I don't think that if you lose Colorado, that's it. But losing Arizona, again, you just said it. That's 4 teams gone. You're basically hanging your hat on Oregon and Washington, carrying the entire conference. And I just don't think that they have that kind of staying power nationally. Oregon's a big brand nationally. they could do it and they can kind of pull their own weight. But at a certain point, that's your entire brand. And it's not to disparage Washington. I know that Washington's a great program right now. We all are very high on the Huskies and what they could do in the immediate future, but they haven't established themselves nationally as that type of a brand, at least yet. And obviously, I mean, the whole Nike thing is half of that. And so we understand that there's a built-in advantage for Oregon in that way. But I just think that what you have to consider here is what they're losing and sort of where their markets are going. At that point, if your markets are the Northwest and your markets are Seattle and like Portland and some of those teams, those aren't big enough. San Francisco as well. You're not looking at big enough TV markets to hold football interest from a college football standpoint long enough if some of these teams sort of fall off, right? At the end of the day, like if in the Big 12, if Baylor's irrelevant and if Texas Tech is irrelevant and all those teams fall off, Dallas-Fort Worth is still watching football. Oklahoma City is still watching football. Houston and Austin, those towns are still watching football. I don't know that you can say the same thing about Seattle, Portland, some of those up there. So I don't think that Colorado is the nail that does it. If the Big 12 goes the direction of like SMU and they leave Arizona alone, I think that the Pac-12 can salvage something and go talk to a Boise State or somebody like that. But unless that's going to be the case, if they go take Arizona, then you're losing out on Arizona State. You're missing out on a lot of the other like sort of Southwest rivalries and some of the tracks that they've built in the Southwest there. I think that would end up doing it if they lost Arizona.
I think if Colorado will be another domino to fall, I don't think it's the death knell, but yeah, like Garrett's saying, you lose Arizona State, Utah, it's over. That's all she wrote. And Oregon and Washington are going to be begging the Big Ten to let them in. If they can't go to the Big Ten, they might just join the Big 12 as well, because that's the next best option. And there's geographic familiarity there. But listen, I kind of take a little bit of umbrage with calling it the SS Kliavkoff, because that dude inherited just a no-win situation. And I get it. It is funny. And it is, but the dude is doing his best. Like I have full confidence that he is working every connection that he has. He was a very good hire for the Pac-12. They needed a different mindset in there when he was hired. This is all Larry Scott's fault. This is 120% Larry Scott's fault. And his legacy, I think he is, just ecstatic that he is not at the helm when this does finally come crumbling down. But his missteps over the past decade plus, the boondoggle that is the Pac-12 network, the, just failing to keep your biggest brands happy, the, whistling while Rome burns, is just going to go down in history as a very, very sad. I hope it's more than a footnote, but I'm a little concerned that he's not going to get the credit that he deserves for trashing this thing. I mean, remember a few years ago we were talking about what does the Pac-12 need to do? Weren't they renting out just a multi-million-dollar office space in San Francisco that no one was in, or something crazy like that? Just a crazy bit. Larry Scott had no idea what he was doing. He had Bill Walton calling his conference the Conference of Champions, and I guess thought that that was the only endorsement that he needed, because he literally is going to go down in history as responsible for this. Personally, whatever platform I have, I'm not going to let people forget that. I hope Kliavkoff doesn't have to take all the blame from Larry Scott.
Oh, come for the SEC chatter, stay for the Larry Scott / Nero comparison. Welcome to the 3 Tech Pod. We are
men of many interests here.
That's right. Listen, Kliavkoff is going to catch the flack, at least from the casuals, and calling the Pac-12 the SS Kliavkoff clearly is in jest, right? In no way is this Kliavkoff's sole responsibility, because you're right. This dude came in with Rome already on fire, and they said, "Hey, make it even better." Right? Yeah. Let's not. There's nothing to rebuild. Just make it better. When in reality, he's now working with charred ashes of foundations. Right. It's
he was the mayor of Pompeii after the volcano erupted.
Exactly. With absolutely no notice of the volcano that swept through and leveled everything. Right. So Yeah, the Pac-12 is. I don't honestly see a path forward for the Pac-12 as a Power Five conference. I think the dominoes have been tipped over. I think we're watching the nails being driven into the coffin. I just, and if you're an SMU and San Diego State fan, which I was reading an article the other day, and it was like, okay, well, if Colorado leaves, like, fine, geographically, it's not a huge deal. They just get San Diego State. I'm like, man, Colorado hasn't been impressive on the athletic field in a while, but you cannot tell me that Colorado and San Diego State are the same thing.
No.
You talk about having a perception problem. Even if championships, financially, whatever metric you want to use, academically, even if Colorado and San Diego State are somewhat similar, you cannot tell me that at a national scale, everybody will go, okay, everybody, just turn off the alarms. No need to panic. We got San Diego State. That's not going to work. So, the thinnest of ice that the Conference of Champions is walking right now.
Well, and the Pac-12 is still one of the few conferences that does care about academics, at least on paper.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
Colorado is an AAU university for when it comes to academics. So is Arizona. So is Arizona State. You're going to tell me that Stanford is going to be okay with being in the same conference as San Diego State and, some of these other options, San Jose State, Fresno, all them? I don't think so. I don't see them. I don't see Stanford and Cal getting on board with that, which just is another wrench in the plans. And
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys. This is kind of in jest, but did Texas kill the Pac-12 by trying to orchestrate this, 6-team merger from the Big 12 and not really bringing anyone else in on that and letting
That would
Barry
be a
Scott
really-
bank on Texas being able to make this deal?
See, that would be a really interesting, deep dive discussion on, if
Yes.
Texas had worked it out and they got A&M and Oklahoma State and all those other teams that were involved in that supposed deal, if they had gotten them to the Pac-12, what would things have looked like? If that deal had worked out, then Johnny Manziel would have been a Pac-12 quarterback, and you would have had.
He might have stayed in
Matt
Oregon.
Brown might have still stuck around. You would have
Yeah,
had
right.
you know what I mean? That's kind of crazy that you could consider Baker Mayfield would have been a Pac-12 quarterback in that situation, and so and Kyler Murray, and so I just think that'd be really interesting to deep dive on what that would look like. Maybe we do a segment on that at some point of,
Yeah.
did Texas kill the Pac-12? Because you might have a point there, Trey.
That's an
there's a
off-season
chance that-
mini-series for next year.
Yeah,
Join us
right.
next week as I lay my case.
we should do top 5 individuals responsible for the death of the Pac-12, and somehow Kliavkoff doesn't make the list, and it's Scott's at the top, and then Texas AD is up there, and some of those guys.
You've got the creation. It's that domino meme. You've got the creation of the Longhorn Network. That's a small domino being tipped over, and then the big domino is the just
says
evisceration of the Pac-12
Big Ten
conference.
champion
The Lost
USC.
Gods just
Yes,
going
yeah,
all
exactly.
in on torched,
Exactly.
scorched earth.
Yeah.
Stanford joining the Ivy League. Yeah, a fascinating discussion. I agree. That is probably meant for another time and place with a little bit more research.
I think we
put
need
into
a
it, but-
spin-off pod that's like Serial almost, where we're just interviewing all these people and a little catchy theme music and who killed the Pac-12.
That's right. Just conspiracy theories, sports conspiracy theories related to college football. Hey, stay tuned. Stay tuned. All right, guys. Well, we've dissected an 8-game conference schedule for the SEC. We've welcomed Colorado to the Big 12. We've given the Pac-12 last rites. I think that's a pretty good day's work for today's episode. We appreciate you guys listening as always, watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple. Like I mentioned, we're welcoming new listeners, new subscribers on YouTube, on the podcast side each and every day, which is just a blast to see folks coming back to college football. We have some OGs that have stuck with us all through the long, cold off season. But guys, I think college football is starting to bloom again. We're in June now. You've got media rights meetings. You've got spring meetings, summer meetings that are coming up. You'll have media days coming up here in July, in the very beginning of August. So, it's almost fully unleaded time. And we talked about this. We're getting ready to go back to 2 episodes a week very, very shortly. So stay tuned. Not exactly sure when that date will be quite yet, but if you are a fan of the podcast, you've been missing 2 episodes a week, it's coming very, very soon. Of course, head on over, check out the Transfer Portal CFB. We've got a magazine coming out. You can pre-order that. And head on over and check out University Traditions and their hats as well. We're repping them just about every single episode. You guys are wearing your hats. I decided to go maybe vacation vibes. I didn't wear a hat this time. Usually I do. But anyway, for Trey Reeves, for Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious, how about